Buenas and Hafide, this emergency session of Iminay 36 na Legislature in Guam is called to order. Majority Whip, Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to adopt today's legislative session agenda dated July 20th, 2022.
A motion was made to adopt today's legislative session agenda dated July 20, 2022. Are there any objections? Motion carries. For the prayer, Senator Tidegui, kindly lead us.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, we come before you humbled always by the honor of serving you, your people, through our work in this legislature. We come before you today determined as your servants to use our life experiences, our expertise, our energy, and our limited time here to help build a stronger and more hopeful future for our community. Lord, we seek your guidance, your protection, and your support in all the work that we do on behalf of our families. In the discussions and the debates we engage in, and in the decisions we make on public policy that will impact the lives of thousands who call Guam home. We pray for our sisters and brothers who have been adversely impacted by COVID, physically and emotionally or financially. We pray that they will find healing, comfort, and true peace. Lord, I ask my colleagues now to join me in a moment of silence as we remember Roland Vilverde. As you know, Roland worked in my office, and he has also worked in other legislative offices throughout his career in the legislature. Roland is a public servant, a musician, an entrepreneur, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and he was a true and dear friend. And it has been a privilege and honor to have worked with him. We pray for his wife, Sil, and their children, Roland Jr., Vanessa, Shaylin, Vanderick, Asia, and Dory, and their children. In a moment of silence. Lord, we continue in your good faith. We conclude this prayer together, and we, with unshakable faith and trust, we have in you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
Deciduous Masi, Senator Tidegui, to express a never-ending and never-forgotten gratitude by the people of Guam, the legislature recognizes recipients of a Miladzen Mastakilu na Sacrificio on a display in the Guam Congress Building and during each of its sessions. For the recognition of a recipient, Senator Rogel, you are recognized.
On behalf of a grateful island and country, we honor Sergeant Anthony Martin M. Bloss and the family of Sergeant Anthony Martin M. Bloss for making the ultimate sacrifice in service and defense of our island and country.
Deciduous Masi, Senator Rogel. Senator San Agustin, kindly lead us in the Inifresi.
Inifresi. Gini mastakulu, gina soku. Imastakulum gikorosono. Dani mas figu nene sinyaho. Ufresin maisazu, barabai hu pertei. Za defendi, inengi, I cultura, I linguaje, I airi, I hanum, zanitano samoro. Iren socco, diretsu, gines zu stata. Estio afirma gihilo Biblia, zanimbenderao. I benderan guan.
Deciduous Masi, Senator San Agustin. Senator Ada, please lead us in the singing of the Guam Hymn, followed by Senator Blas in the singing of the national anthem.
Panogita moru purita nota, kantai mantunanya gitoru iluga. Para I honra, para I gloria, viva I isla sempada. Para I honra, para I gloria, viva I isla sempada. Todu I tempo I bas para hita, zangen in I langen na bendisha. Contra peligro na fansapuha, Zeus protect ye island one. Contra peligro na fansapuha, Zeus protect ye island one.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Seduis Masi. Madam Clerk, please take the roll call.
Senator Atta. Senator Blas. Senator Brown. Senator Duenas. Senator Moylan. Vice Speaker Munya Barnes. Senator Nelson. Senator Perez. Senator Ragel. Senator San Augustine. Senator Shelton. Senator Tydegui. Senator Terlahi. Speaker Terlahi. Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Seduis Masi, Madam Clerk. Majority Whip, Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to approve the legislative journals dated June 17, 2022, and July 11, 2022, subject to corrections.
On the motion to approve the legislative journals dated June 7th, 2022 and July 11th, 2022, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that communications and petitions be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Majority Whip, Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are messages from Imagahagan Guahan, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that messages from Imagahagan Guahan be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Majority Whip, Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are reports of standing committees, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that reports of standing committees be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Majority Whip, Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are no reports of select committees.
Seduis Masi, please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I move that bills introduced, bill numbers 317-36 COR through 320-36 COR, 321-36 LS, and 322-36 LS, and 323-36 COR through 328-36 COR, And resolutions introduced, Resolutions 385-36LS through 387-36LS and 388-36COR through 393-36COR be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Majority Whip Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to excuse senators not present for today's legislative session.
On the motion to excuse members not present, hearing no objection, motion carries. Senator Perez, Majority Whip, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move that all congratulatory, commendatory, and condolence resolutions introduced today and for the remainder of this legislative session be considered first read and adopted to allow the Legislative Council to make technical corrections and to add all senators as co-sponsors.
On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We are now in motions. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to place Bill number 325-36COR as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, Housing, introduced by myself, Senator Joe S. San Augustine, co-sponsored by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, Senator Talina C. Nelson, Senator Clint Rigel, Senator James C. Mullen, Senator Jose Piru Terlai, an act to amend Section 2 of Chapter 1 and Section 2 of Part 1, Chapter 3, and add a new Section 21 to Chapter 11, all of Public Law 36-54, General Appropriation Act of 2022, relative to establishing and funding the program Ajuda para Itautauta Energy Credit Program onto the session agenda.
On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to resolve into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of deliberating Bill 325-36CR as amended by the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, introduced by myself, Senator Joe S. San Augustine, co-sponsored by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, Senator Talina Nelson, Senator Clint Rigel, Senator Jim Moylan, Senator Jose Piru Terlai, an act to amend Section 2 of Chapter 1 and Section 2 of Part 1, Chapter 3, and add a new Section 21 to Chapter 11, all of Public Law 36-54, General Appropriation Act of 2022, relative to establishing and funding the program Ajuda para Itautauta Energy Credit Program. And the panel guests will include Department Administration, the Office of Public Accountability, and GPA, if I'm correct, and then the Director of OFB.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. Before we proceed with the motion, I'd like to inform the body that there are no items on the legislative concurrence part of the agenda. On the motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of Bill number 325-36COR as amended, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We are now in the Committee of the Whole. We are in recess. The Committee of the Whole is called to order. Materials for the Committee of the Whole are in the shared session Google Drive labeled 7/2022 Committee of the Whole. Proposed amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk via email at 36glsession@gmail.com. Amendments not in writing will be called out of order. There will be 3 rounds for discussion. We will have 2 rounds of questions for the panel, with each senator allotted 5 minutes for questions, not including responses. Time to speak may not be yielded from more than one member to another. A member who yields that member's time on a question yields all that member's time on that question and may not later speak, even if all the time yielded was not used, from Section 1.02D of our standing rules. After the completion of the 2 rounds of questions, the panel will be excused. The 3rd round will be for amendments or comments to speak on the bill. After we complete discussion of the bill, we will allow the sponsor to close and entertain a motion for the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole, followed by a motion to rise from the Committee of the Whole, at which time we will report out the bill as recommended by the Committee of the Whole. Seduas Masi, colleagues, for your cooperation. We are now on Bill number 325-36 COR, as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing, introduced by Senator Joe S. San Augustine, Tina Rose Munoz Barnes, Talina C. Nelson, Clinton E. Rigel, James C. Moylan, and Jose Pito Terlahi. An act to amend Section 2 of Chapter 1 and Section 2 of Part 1, Chapter 3, and add a new Section 21 to Chapter 11, all of Public Law 36-54, General Appropriations Act of 2022, relative to establishing and funding the Programa de Ayuda para Itauta Energy Credit Program. I now call on our Sergeant at Arms to swear in our panel.
Please rise and raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Madam Chair, under oath, you may proceed.
Seduas Masi. Now call on Senator San Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, and to the people of Guam, Bill 325-36 CR, as amended. As an act to amend Section 2 of Chapter 1 and Section 2 of Part 1, Chapter 3, and add a new Section 21 to Chapter 11, all of Public Law 36-54, General Appropriation Act of 2022, relative to establishing and funding the Programa Ayuda para Itauta Energy Credit Program. My colleagues and the people of Guam, as government revenues have exceeded the adopted fiscal year 22 budget at almost 85, and today we've all received the new CRE, and it's beyond 90 million now. As reported, my office and I work to find ways on how we can help our people when the cost of living has made significant increase in the cost of food, fuel, and utilities. This work created the Programa Ayuda para Itauta Energy Credit Program. In the public hearing committee conducted last Friday, July 15, we heard from Guam Power Authority General Manager, Mr. John Beneventi, that the number of GPA customers increased to 51,254 from the initial 50,624, thus an increased appropriation of $25,627,000 will be required to adequately fund the $100 monthly credit per meter account for the next 5 months. We also heard from the Bureau of Budget and Management Research Director, Lester Carlson, who testified that the intent to increase the appropriation fiscal year 2022 budget and make a direct appropriation to the credit program would be adequate to fund the program. We would also be making an increase to GMHA, Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, Pharmaceutical Fund to reflect the increase in the general fund appropriations as mandated. He further expressed that the governor fully supports this measure to bring some relief to our residents and business as we are affected by the increase of the LEAC. Madam Chair, the Programa Ayuda para Itauta is designed to help every family and business who have a GPA meter registered to them. Every meter will benefit from this program as we intend to provide them with $100 credit to their GPA account for each of the next 5 months. The funding source identified is ready and available for use. Let us give our people this relief from monies that we have the authority to use. The rising cost of fuel and the cost of living on our island have caused families to face difficulties with stretching their pocketbooks, and I hope this program, Ajuda para Itautauta Energy Credit Program, will offer relief, allowing families to put food on their table. I look forward to the discussions, start strengthening the bill in efforts to help our people. Madam Chair.
Assiduous Masi, Senator San Augustine.
I have no questions, so we can move to the next colleague.
Okay, we'll ask the panel to introduce themselves for first and what agency they're from. Getting to my right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Benevente, General Manager, Guam Power Authority.
Good afternoon. Edward Byrne, Director of Administration.
Steve Guerrero, Office of Finance and Budget.
Good afternoon, BJ Cruz, Public Auditor, Office of Public Accountability.
Thank you very much. We'll begin with Senator Ridgell.
I don't have any questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ridgell. Senator Paris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to the panel today. Thank you for coming. I just have a question regarding the audit that just came out or was released yesterday, in which there was a 31.9 million surplus that was identified with a balance of 30.4 million due to the deficit in the previous year. So I guess the question is for, Public Auditor, in regards to this, or maybe actually for DOA, Director Byrne, does this surplus factor into the post-budget appropriation bills?
It's certainly related to that, yes, Senator.
So it's already subtracted to leave this amount that's remaining?
No. The financial statements you were looking at are the financial statements for fiscal 21. I've often, when commenting on the very question you're asked, noted that continuing appropriations are not included in the year that's being reported on. So the following year, expenditures that were carried forward from 21 will appear in 22. But the premise of your question is correct, that the resultant surplus, and I think we went through that process when we examined some of those bills. The resultant surplus was available to fund some of those bills.
So just to clarify, you're saying that, you're not quite confirming the question, I think, because what I'm trying to get at is how much do we really have, right? Considering the appropriations that we did after the budget, the 2022 budget. So what do we have to spend?
Thank you for asking the question that way. Effectively, you appropriated all the surplus that was reported in 21.
Can you say that again? It wasn't clear.
Effectively, the total surplus that was reported in 21 was appropriated by subsequent bills that were debated and passed in 22.
Okay, so then what you're saying is that this report has been appropriated. The 30.4 million has already been appropriated. There's nothing left.
No, it's been appropriated. That's correct in the ensuing year.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the reason why I'm asking this question, because in reference to the Bill 325, we are increasing the revenue amount. And I guess maybe the assumption is where is this money coming from for the increase?
Well, the bill appropriates revenues from 22. I mean, all the figures that are in here come from the budget bill for fiscal 22. So it really, there's no impact on, I think was what you were asking. There was no impact on 21 because this is all 22 revenues.
Okay, and so where are we at? I mean, the problem with that is we don't know really for sure what's there until the audit is completed, which is the subsequent year. So maybe you can give us a detail of what is currently, what do we have in the 2022 as far as the surplus?
Yeah, again, when you ask that question, I don't see any difference between debating a budget bill. You don't know what the revenues are going to be when you're considering a budget bill. It's an estimate.
Correct.
This is an updated estimate of that budget bill. So, as Senator St. Augustine just said, the CRER that was issued this morning revealed revenues in excess of the original budget amount of it's $99 million. So $99 million. That was the surplus revenues that were in the CRER for June.
Okay, this is the 2022, now we're talking
Yes,
2022.
2022, yes.
So 99 million
Yes,
excess.
that was what was on the CRER that came out this morning.
Okay, and this doesn't include this report? This
No, it doesn't
31.9.
include what's in here, but it will. But those revenues are available to be appropriated by this bill.
Okay, all right, thank you. So this question is for the public auditor. In your report, you, I think at some point it was estimated, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was estimated that there was about, let's see, 79.2 million. Is that correct? And then it dropped down to 31.9 million.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay, so in the report, the final surplus is noted as 31.9 million for fiscal year 2021, but it was much less than the 79.2 million excess general fund revenues reported in the audit. Perhaps if you can explain what happened there? Or is there an explanation of why the excess general fund revenue was much greater than the surplus that came out in the audit report?
I think, like what Mr. Byrne was saying, we are discussing several different things. The revenue and the revenue projection are one thing. The surplus is what might have been realized, which is more than what was originally projected. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have all that money, because, as I was trying to explain to someone earlier today, is there are other prior year obligations. There are almost $1 billion worth of appropriation bills that prior legislatures have appropriated in the past. And so, though you may have budgeted for the operation of the government 700, let's say, just take for discussion, 700 million for operations, Mr. Byrne may have been very conscientious about making sure the departments keep to their appropriations, and at the end of the year may actually meet that they only spend what they've been appropriate for their operations. But also, you forget that there are all these appropriations from the 30th Guam Legislature, some from the 20th Guam Legislature that haven't been repealed, that are still there. And so if the administration, whoever it is, whoever he or she is as governor, If they decide that they want to spend that money, they can encumber that money and build whatever it is that was in that appropriation bill. And so all those additional expenses cut into what might have been the projected revenue surplus that was realized, but was also being used for operations.
In the actual audit, it states the collected amount was 79.2, so it's above the projected budget.
Correct.
And so how do we get down to?
And there were other expenses that that DOA paid for that may not have been in the budget, but had been in prior appropriation bills. Okay. And they can certify those. They can say, yes, I can spend this money because whoever was the director of the agency can say certified pursuant to Public Law 30-5 as opposed to 36- whatever. Okay. And so there's all that out there, and they have the ability to be able to do that until such time as you repeal all that, they have that authority to do it. Okay. And so what you thought was going to be a surplus has been spent for other things, but it doesn't mean that it was improperly spent because they have authorization in prior appropriation bills.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So I guess moving forward to this surplus, so you're predicting a 99 million surplus. So do we have an account of the liabilities, just exactly what the public auditor was saying? Do we know what's out there that we're going to encumber so that we can have a more adequate or accurate amount of what we can use at this time?
If I could first just add to what the public auditor said, the ability to pay these prior year obligations materialized because we had a surplus. In prior years when we had a deficit, there wasn't enough money to pay these obligations. By generating a surplus, albeit now reduced by those obligations.
So, yeah, I get the concept, but I'm just wondering if you can provide an actual detailed amount of liability that the government has so that we can really identify what's available. That's what I'm asking.
Yes, but I just wanted to finish that thought because it's very important. That will be determined when we do the financial statements for fiscal 22. We don't normally do our fiscal report in the middle of July. So when we draw up our financial statements for fiscal 22, then we will get a full reckoning of all the liabilities that would be offset against the excess revenues that are being reported.
Yeah, I understand that there might be some incidentals, right, that we don't budget for, but I'm sure there's some accounting that exists where we do have an identified liability as far as vendors, perhaps cases that still need to be rendered. Do you at least have an estimate of that?
Well, if I can remind you of what Mr. Carlson said at the public hearing, this legislature has appropriated monies already for fiscal 22. For instance, the local share of the LEAP money. So that's spent. It's not a liability, it's spent. And we continue to look at these liabilities as they arrive. Again, I would remind the Senator that our vendors are now being paid on time, generally within 30 days. And certainly, if DOA receives the invoice, it gets paid in 30 days. So it's not like liabilities are piling up. We're actually expending them and dispersing them as we go.
No, that's always good, but for transparency, I think it's really critical that we have this dialogue so that we know what we can spend, right? We don't want to overspend. That's always something that's always in the back of our mind. So I just really wanted to maybe get that information from you, more transparency in this. The other thing I have is, what is this unfunded liability fund? I've never heard of that. Is it created by statute?
No, it's not created by statute.
Okay, because in the audit, it states that there wasn't enough budgeted for the retiree health insurance premiums. It cost $13.1 million more. And then it had to cover, there were general fund revenues had to cover $15.81 million shortfall in the unfunded liability fund. So what was paid for with that $15.8 million?
Could you point me to where you're looking at those numbers?
I would have to get that to you, but it's in the report. Maybe the public auditor, if you recall what particular area that was in.
I don't remember the page, but I understand the question that you're asking. There is an obligation that the Department of Administration does when it signs the health insurance. And in order to be able to cover all of us, it makes good on the payment. The legislature may have budgeted $69 million, but it may have run 81 or 84. And so that money that difference has to be paid. And that comes from what I guess they're calling the unfunded liability fund. That it's an obligation that was undertaken by the government, and they're going to have to cover that shortfall. Because I don't think anybody knows what the final amount is going to be for negotiations on the insurance. So they just say, we're signing this, and we'll have to deal with whatever the excess is, and it'll be paid. It's unfortunate. But on your earlier question, when you were asking about the outstanding liabilities, there was a time in the past, and maybe I know I saw it when I was here, where Department of Administration published a list of all the appropriation bills that have been passed by the legislature that haven't been encumbered, that are still on the books. And if you want to know how much is still out there, there is that report. And it really is closing in on $1 billion, if not more, because it has everybody's pet project of the baseball field in Umatha and gym in Talafofu, and the director doesn't know when it's going to be built, but at some point when the administration decides it needs Talafofu and it wants to build a sports center, it doesn't come back to you, it just says, oh, the 27th Guam Legislature left me this appropriation bill. And so they build it. And Mr. Byrne can sign the certification that pursuant to a public law in 28th Guam Legislature, there was an authorization to build this, and so they can build it. It wasn't in the 780 that you thought was the budget for this year, but it is something that they're going to spend because they had $79 million in excess revenue, or surplus from the projection. And so until such time as all of those are either, I know when I was here, nobody liked the thought of, when I kept pushing it, repeal all of those and just pass the ones that you want to have built today, they'll be there. And any administration will be able to at any time decide, I'm going to do this. And it's not in the budget bill, but it is, as I tried to explain to one of my friends earlier, it's like giving your spouse or your child a budget to spend, but you give them cash, but you also give them a credit card. they're going to spend the cash, and then they'll say, oh, but I got my credit card, which also has a 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, whatever limit, and they can go out and spend that. And that wasn't part of your budget, but you're going to have to pay for it at some point.
Yeah, thank you so much for those responses. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Prayers. Senator Brown?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Certainly by the question by the previous Senator Sabina, and certainly the response by our Public Auditor, B.J. Cruz. I mean, now it makes it even bigger question as to whether or not this money is available if it's already been appropriated, and there's still these outstanding obligations in the government. But Madam Chair, we did have our Congressman Mike Nicholas, just before us a little over a week and a half ago on Monday, providing his State of the Congress address. And certainly one of the things that he mentioned that I think we need to explore, because we've certainly seen, and not clearly, I'm still up to date, I don't know if any other member of this body is very clear on how a lot of this federal funding has been spent, because I have yet to see it. I see printouts that list how much has been given to each government agency and maybe supposedly how much they've expended, but I still don't know what this money has been spent on. There's been no transparency with regards to that. And as such, I want to make sure that we're exhausting all options before we look at local funding that will give us less flexibility moving forward on being able to fund critical needs in our community that we've not. There's still issues of education, there's still issues of public safety that we need to fund that perhaps this money is not available for. The administration has been hoarding $300 million plus in addition to the funds they have expended that they've not publicly accounted for how this money is being expended. And I think before we move forward, I hope the body would like clarification. We're certainly not the experts with regards to the federal funding. We're not experts with regards to the global situation and the cost of oil or the ongoing war with Russia and the Ukraine, unless anyone wants to stand up and hold their hand up that they are. So I certainly would like to hear from our congressional delegate, from his position in Congress that he's been elected to letting us know whether or not this federal funding that currently exists can be used or can be expended, because there's no doubt we recognize the impact that has happened to our community and the cost of living in the last few months that's really adversely affected our people. But I think moving forward, I want to ensure that we've exhausted all options with regards to federal funding. I'd like to request, I believe the Congressman said Nicholas is on island, but I think he'd be more of the expert to relay to us this information. If we could respectfully request if he could come in and join the panel this afternoon, so that we could ask questions of him with regards to what the federal funds can or cannot be spent on, because he certainly did elaborate on that last week, Monday, to the Guam Legislature, and I certainly would like to hear more and clarify whether or not the federal funds can be used. We hear the administration telling us what it can or cannot be used for, but I've also seen a lot of this money being used for advertising and electioneering, and I'd rather see that money go directly to our people. They've been holding on to a substantial amount of this for quite some time. And if the federal funds can be used for this purpose, then by all means, I think we should prioritize the use of the federal funds to address the request of this appropriation. So that's my request, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brown. We'll have our team reach out to the congressman. Are you done with your questions?
Yes, for this round, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Ada?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Public Auditor Cruz, so as you were mentioning to Senator Perez about all these bills and legislations that have been signed into law and passed that appropriates funding for those are still issues that we still need to be cautious of. Am I correct?
Yes, cautious, cognizant of. Be aware of the fact that they're there, and just know that it's possible. The one example that I like to use, because I was screaming about it at one time, was the merit pay. Remember that in the last administration, where they found a 1994 law that said that merit bonuses had to be paid? Mm-hmm. and some departments paid all the way back to 94, some paid only the last 3 years, but those things were not in any budget that I wrote, but it was in the law that they were able to find and were able to use and say, I can spend this money because this law says it and it hasn't been repealed.
I see, thank you. Director Byrne, on the I guess they call it surplus, right? Excess revenue. We're currently at where right now? On excess revenues? How much do we have?
Senator, at what point in time are you asking the question about?
Well, now, what as of your latest
surplus
report?
revenues, the CRER that came out for June 30th showed revenues in excess. You know, surplus is a word that really doesn't apply. Revenues excess of budgeted revenues of 99 million.
So currently at 99 million excess.
As of June 30th, yes.
As of June 30th. Okay, I see.
Surplus, not excess.
Pardon?
Surplus, not excess.
Surplus, not excess. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Atta. Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the panel. First, I'd like to thank the author of the bill, Senator St. Augustine, for identifying this emergency session and having us come together as an emergency session and writing to the Speaker for that purpose. And in this good Senator's letter to the Speaker, he basically said this is needed because of the COVID pandemic, and stressing that this is the result of what's happening now because of the state of emergency that we are in due to COVID. And then we'd also like to thank the Speaker for calling the emergency session. And again, she expands upon, in light of this continuous negative economic impact from the pandemic, including unemployment, increase, cost of food and housing, the housing insecurity, and the rapid rise in gas prices, and the significant increase to power rates at the Guam Power Authority, and the need to provide additional and immediate direct aid to individuals, households, and businesses. The Speaker certified that we come together for this bill because it's involving the danger to the public health or safety. So that's why we're here, because it's a COVID-related issue. But yet, oh well, I think CNMI gets it, because there's this article in Mariana's Variety that talks about their Department of Finance that collaborated with the Commonwealth Utilities, their version of GPA, has credited to each ratepayer's account a $500 utility stimulus that the CNMI government hopes would help ease the residents' financial burden caused by COVID-19. So $500 to their CUC. They invested $7.5 million, and they uploaded it to over 6,000 utility customers and residents' accounts. And the 500 utility stimulus is one of the ways that the CNMI government is utilizing federal funds from American Rescue Plan Act that the Commonwealth received last year. So I'm sure they got the same rules that we have, but somehow their interpretation says they agree they can use this. And we came together from the author of this bill saying it's a COVID-19 related. The Speaker said emergency session because it's a health for COVID-19 related, the pandemic related issue. So my question is, and I would have directed this to BBMR, but now Mr. Byrne, I'm sure you can assist me on this, please. Can you provide us with a clear evidence that we can't use federal ARPA funds for this utility credit program?
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to help you, as you say. The CNMI doesn't have a surplus. The surplus is evidence of our ability to control our spending and not spend money that we don't have. If we spend money that we don't have, we wouldn't have a surplus. So the CNMI doesn't have those funds. I have the final rule here that we received from Treasury. It was effective April the 1st. The Governor, I, and much of the administration has been through the final rule with a fine-tooth comb. I can find no evidence, and maybe somebody else can go through it and point it out to me, but I can find no evidence that a rate increase caused by, or primarily caused by a war in Europe is authorized to be spent under federal funds in order to be offset by those federal funds.
Thank you, sir. We also understand that people have been unemployed due to COVID-19, lack of funds to pay their utility bills as well, to pay for their fuel, to pay for substance as well. Are you saying then, and I'm not referring to the excess amount of money or the surplus amount, I'm just specifically talking about ARPA funds. Are you saying that this relief effort has no bearing on the COVID-related pandemic? Zero. This relief effort that we're trying to do now for the ratepayers, that CNMI has done for their ratepayers, has nothing to do at all because of this COVID pandemic.
Well, there's no such thing as nothing, but I think we could probably all determine that it is primarily not to do with the COVID pandemic. Indeed, you may recall that fuel prices plummeted during the COVID pandemic, not increased. But I would like to point out, Senator, that we have been paying considerable amounts of utility bills, power, water, and to some extent internet, to those recipients under the rental agreement, the rental assistance program and the homeowners assistance program that are federal funds. They're not ARPA funds, they're specific programs, and those people have been recipients of the entire fuel bill.
Leads me to my next question, thank you. This administration has used federal funds when providing lump sum to GPA. We did that earlier because we didn't want that rate to increase to the ratepayers. We saw that need then, and we wanted to help our ratepayers, to help reduce the utility rates for that purpose. So we did it before, but we can't do it now. How was that justified, but now it's not justified?
Well, there's two reasons. The first time we did it, we were operating under the interim rules, which were much less structured. And we were able to determine that at that time, what we were dealing with was a potential rate increase that we were able to offset. This time we're operating under final rules that don't permit it. We were advised by the Treasury that anything that we did, providing it wasn't too flagrant, under the interim rules would be agreed to by the Treasury, but that we had to abide by the final rules.
Let's discuss the program Salapit. We started this off to assist families with the rising fuel cost. And I remember that, and that would be the same cost of fuel that is impacting utility rates today. And now we're on the third round of this program, which is good, So now it's okay, but funding this plan with federal funds isn't. Again, can you clarify that for me, please?
Yes, sir, thank you. The program SALAPI is means tested and therefore falls within the Treasury rules that are set out at length in the final rules booklet related to disadvantaged economic, and we've interpreted it as families. So that's why it's means tested. That's why the program SALAPI is awarded to households with incomes related to the minimum wage earners table that's published by the federal government. So the difference is that it's means tested, not blanketed like this proposed bill proposes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Senator Dueñas.
Madam Chair, and building off of the questions from my colleagues, I first want to go to the public auditor. So using the numbers of the audited financials on fiscal 21, so we have the 79.2 in excess revenue over adopted projections, but then we ended up with only a 30.5 adjusted, but we appropriated to the level of the 79 million. Would we now be considered having a deficit? Because we passed a number of bills that actually appropriated up to the $79 million level, but now the adjusted revenues only shows the 30.5. Would we have been deficit spending now then, having used those revenues in 2021?
If the Department of Administration had spent all that 79, more than the 79 million, then you would have been in deficit, but they kept the line. And if I could, Madam Chair, just address one other issue. I'm sorry, and don't count it against him, please, but I have to. One, I want to apologize to the legislature and to the people of Guam because of the late issuance of the audit. I tried everything to try to get it out as early as possible. I was sending nastygrams to everybody. I wanted to get it out in March, but I was assured it was going to be out by statutory June 30th. And then they had to have the compliance, there was a compliance letter that's now, again, I apologize, it is being released as we speak. It is the single audit of the use of federal funds. In 2019, we had $377 million or $378 million of federal funds. And when the auditors went through and checked to see whether or not it was spent properly, barely $1.1 million was found question cost. In 2020, there was $837 million worth of federal funds that were expended. And when the audit was done, when Deloitte went through and did their testing, they could only find $1.3 million in question cost. Last year, 2021, the expenditure was $1,400,000. Okay, $1.4 billion. The question cost went up to $41 million. Wow. So I am very happy to hear the Director of Administration be really cautious about why. When you see the release and you see the highlights from the single audit, you will find that there were 15 programs. They looked at 18. There were 15 programs that were qualified findings. In 2019, the single audit only found 8 findings, okay? 8 problems. In 2020, it was 18.
Wow.
In 2021, which is now just being released, it's 30. And a couple of weeks ago, it was 33. And the reason why it was I'm delaying the release until just now is because when I received it yesterday, day before it was yesterday afternoon, the 18th, I had to go through and check why did they drop the 3? Why was the number reduced from 43 to 41 million? But I had to look at those kinds of things. There were all kinds of deficiencies in the way that the programs are being operated. So I really commend the administration for trying to be cautious about this. And though I shouldn't say it, I agree that this additional amount that they want for the 500 to go to GPA for the LEAC may be found to be more Ukraine-related than it was pandemic. There was $15 million that was given to GPA during 2020, so that they wouldn't do an increase during that period. And there has been money that has been going to people because there are means tested. But to take $500 off my power bill, that's just I'd love it, but it really shouldn't happen. It only should be means tested, and it only should be the ones that can't afford it. I mean, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't appreciate it, but it really shouldn't. And so that's why I'm happy that the administration is being cautious about this and wanting to make sure that they've read and reread the rules. As I told him, I said, read and reread all the rules and make sure that every time you're going to do something, you can cite to me the rule that you're going to be spending the money on. Because I just don't want next year's question costs to go to 75 million or to 100 million. So I just wanted to state that. And the release will be coming out, and I beg all of you. It's a 3-page highlight, but it's a 3-page highlight. My staff was complaining because the 3-page highlight breaks down the number of programs. It breaks them down by what had major deficiencies and which ones had significant deficiencies. And I ask all of you, please read the findings at the end of the compliance report and understand why it was that they found that there were ineligibility issues, there were reporting issues, there were all kinds of issues, and you're asking what the money was spent for. They've looked at it. And so I appreciate the fact that they're being cautious, and I really encourage the fact that they're being cautious.
Okay, before I go back to my math, Mr. Speaker, Public Auditor, then I'm going to have to turn over then and say, because this proposal is not means tested. This is every account, whether you own condominiums, master meters, whatever else, or the like. That's not what this bill is going to do. It's going to be across the board, like the 15 million, which was the precedent that I had discussed during the public hearing, Mr. Auditor. So I will go to you then, Mr. Byrne, and say, you said that the disparity between the 15 million and this current legislation is because of interim rules and final rules. So give us a copy of the final rule that you're using.
Here's the final rules, Senator.
No. I don't need the binder. I need the text of the final rule that you're quoting.
Well, like any rule, it tells you what you can do, not what you can't do. So it doesn't say, of course it wouldn't say, no civil servant is going to write a rule that says you can't use it to do that. But like the public auditor says, because it's been determined that, and that certainly it says, right the way through PASIM, that you should not use these funds unless it's COVID related. And as the public auditor said, it is not unreasonable to conclude that most of this, if not all of this, fuel increase is not COVID related. We would be in violation of those rules.
Well, I would say this then, Mr. Byrne, if there's $44 million possibly in question costs now, we better factor that into the general fund, because if we have to return that, where's that coming from? That's coming from our tax dollars.
Yes, well, thank you for that question, and I'm pleased to respond. That when you read the report, as the public auditor says, you'll find that half of those question costs are related to payments under the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Plan, which not only are subject to repayment, and it goes into some detail about what's being repaid, but I think an announcement was made yesterday that a large part of it is being forgiven under US DOL rules, and the period for applying for that forgiveness has just been extended to August the 1st.
Well, that's a lot of ifs, so let's get back to the math. We got 79.2 million in audited surplus, but then a 30.5 million in actuals. So from what I understand, I need to get from OFB and BBMR, or the representative of BBMR, that this disparity now, what appropriation level did we appropriate to in terms of the anticipated revenues of 21? Because I believe we appropriated darn near all the 79.2 million, so I need that clarification.
Well, speaking from previous hearings to you, at the time that a number of bills were being discussed in this place, I believe the expected unaudited surplus revenues was like 60.2 million. And may I just point out that the 79 million is not collected, it's earned. So it includes an element of receivables too. So I just want to make that, that clarification clear. But at that time, the director of BBMR went through all the items that this legislature had effectively appropriated or were related to offsets against that surplus, such as the deficits on the special funds that required to be made up.
I understand, Mr. Byrne, but OFB, I need that clarification from you as well, because I don't think we can move forward, because it looks as though we may have now deficit spent in 21 based on the bills that we passed that are public laws that are obligations of the government now, but this audited revenue comes down to 30.5. So Madam Chair, can we take a recess to get that number? Because I don't think we can responsibly move forward on accepting these numbers without figuring out if we have a deficit, because that will affect 2022 revenues in terms of what's currently tracking on the CRER.
Senator Duenas will continue on with the questioning, and we'll come back when we get that number for you.
Okay, can the chair make that official request? I think we need a spreadsheet on that. I think we would be absolutely irresponsible. What we're doing here, finally doing it right, is doing a supplemental appropriation other than just general fund and a number that's been written down on all of our prior appropriations. This is actually going in and line iteming the items. So in order to do that properly, we need to reconcile the possible deficit in 2021. Can the chair please officially request that number and that math?
Okay, we will request that number from, is there someone specific on the panel?
OFB and DOA.
Okay, the request has been made. Noted. Thank you very much, Senator Duenas. Senator Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Byrne, I wanted to ask a question specific to the fiscal note. A lot of the concern when the bill was first introduced was whether we had sufficient funds, notwithstanding the CRER report. and what has been determined to be excess revenue collected above the adopted levels for the fiscal year 2022. But in your fiscal note, there was a listing, and BBMR had cautioned that, and this was citing the May 2022 CRER, the Consolidated Revenue and Expenditure Report. But what was noted here was a caution that there are several bills in process. I believe there is a list of about 10, of which 3 were already signed into public law, so those funds have been spent or will soon be spent. But my question to you then is in looking at the listing of bills, it suggests that the amounts that are then going to be appropriated cumulatively exceeds what is excess revenue right now. And so, in essence, are we in a position with Bill 32536 where it's a first come, first entertained type of bill, and that with the passage of this bill that has a $26 million impact, it then will affect the success of the other bills going forward? So in other words, it appears that you cautioned us that we have bills that exceed in total the number of the excess revenues collected. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I mean, ultimately, it's your decision as to which bills get appropriated and which do not. The fiscal note noted that there were outstanding bills or legislated bills of almost 133 million. This one was one of those. Yes, you have to determine in which order those bills actually are appropriated. I mean, one of those bills by themselves is 56 million, and therefore is a very large lump of that amount that's being reported. Earlier I said that the revenues that we've collected so far this year in excess of the budgeted revenues were 99 million. It may well, here we are in June. I can't tell you that it's not going to go to 133 million or that it might become less, but that's where we are now.
Right, and you mentioned, Bill, the $56 million, which is an appropriation to DOA for income tax rebate. Is that a bill that is a necessary bill, for example? Is that something that we should automatically appropriate for, or is the set aside for the income tax rebate being realized and expended as needed right now?
We are paying tax refunds on time, so that has already been appropriated and taken care of in the fiscal 22 budget bill.
As I understand, yes. Mr. Benavente, I just want to ask you with regard to the emergency, we have, I think there are 2 thoughts going on right now with the community. One is everybody's feeling the stress of escalating prices. I mean, everyone on Guam and nationwide, for the most part, from what we're seeing in other states with prices soaring. But in terms of the relief across the board, there's some thought that only those most in need should get aid, and then there's another feeling that everybody is stressed and could use relief. Everybody, including those that have the means to pay their power bills, and the rising cost of goods on Guam. But are you seeing from GPA a situation, whether it's COVID-related or just due to the worldwide economy being stressed, are you seeing a lot of people with arrearages and disconnections and things like that? So will Bill 325 truly be a relief to Guam and a necessary relief to Guam, in your opinion?
Well, I think the
First of all, the arrearage and all of that, if I may say, for like over 18 months, I believe, we did not disconnect customers, no? So what we did work out with those customers is a payment plan that they can, which is as much as a year or maybe even more in some cases, something that they could afford. And I believe our receivables has been coming down, no? However, because of the more recent, again, one will say, driven by the world oil prices, no, which includes again the Russia issue, fuel prices jumped from 20 to 70% between January and this year, and so again, we didn't come right in for the rate increase, and so much to the point that our under recovery now, I mean, funds that we had, we funded upfront. It looks like by the end of this month or the end of June, about $42 million. So, therefore, to answer that question about whether am I seeing the impact, it's going to have an impact because they're already just paying the higher cost. And I'm sorry, rolling it back, the PUC did raise it from like 18 to 20 cents in around April, but that didn't make really a dent into the higher cost that is there before us. So where it's going to start impacting them is really this month, the bills that are coming out now, and again on September 1st, because we're going from 20 cents, say on June, to 25 cents as of July 1st, then 29 cents in September. So they will feel the numbers, which include, on the average residential customer, which is about 1,000 kilowatt hour, they will see their bill in July jump. Again, this is basically, the consumption was the same, no? About $42, no? And then September, you'll jump another 45 or so. So that's an $80 jump for them. In addition to the fact that during the summer months, their consumption naturally rise, no? So there are going to be a lot of surprises and, of course, a lot of, I can say pain, no? That they're going to see out there.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. I have one question I want to, just for clarity's sake. As I understand it, when we make appropriations from the legislature, it really isn't an authorization, more or less, to spend, but the actual spending is controlled by DOA when there is cash available, and that is what allows you to balance your books or realize excess revenues by not overexpending and managing your spending. So the idea that if we were to over-appropriate, that doesn't necessarily spiral us into a deficit situation, correct? Unless you actually overspend money. That's when a deficit is created, correct?
Yes, Senator, that's correct. Unfortunately, in the past, there was a deficit because I'm sure there was pressure on administrations to spend the entire appropriation, even though, as you say, the funds weren't there really to match it.
So going back to what the OPA brought up, so long as the administration manages their monies and monitors their monies, which are tracked through the CRERs, then you can get into a situation where you will have excess revenues. If your collections are in excess of what your budgeted projections are, then you'll have excess revenues at the end of the day. And so long as you don't overspend, because you are, after all, doing cash management to some degree in government accounting.
It's a dual effort. BBMR looks at, as you know, through their reports, and in particular through the fiscal report, they look at the budgetary aspect of it, and DOA determines whether there's sufficient cash available to pay these bills as they come in. As the public auditor said, sometimes the bills come in higher, like on that retiree health cost. That's just something that's a fact, but we have to pay the bill in order that the retirees can get their medical insurance.
Yes, and after all, budgets are just budgets. They're never accurate into the dime. And I know my time is up, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Titlegy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we just received an amendment at the beginning of Bill 325. So I'm asking the author what changed from the original bill to now. What is the difference?
Madam Chair, it's the amount that was recognized by GPA and BBMR when we identified, number one, the number of customers, and the pharmaceutical fund had to go up. Every time you change those numbers, that's the amounts that have to change. Thank you.
Okay, my question then is to GPA. It was during the public hearing that they were asking about those who are 1 meters when you have customers, and it was estimated that were 2,000 ratepayers out there, but they're using 1 meter. Did you provide that to the oversight chair or the author of this bill? That figure and how much more it would cost?
I'm not, I have to double check whether we had sent that information over. However, there is we have looked, and there is about 17 account, at least 17 again, because there are some that are out there that are not as big as these ones, right? But totaling about 1,500. There are 17 accounts that have a total of about 1,500 individual residential or condo homes, no? But they are built under 1 meter, and that 1 meter is in the 50. It's only counted as 1 meter under the 50,854. So, as was brought up, I believe, by the Alupang condo, that has about 200 some units. So if the legislature is to consider that as to provide for 200 an equivalent for the 200 units under the 1 meter, then my suggestion is that the number be of 2,000 times $500 million be added to the 25.627, so that there is an adequate appropriation to address that. And the suggestion at that time was to have them certify how many are occupied, if you will, and if so, by them certifying it, we can honor that, and it's something, the procedure is something that we're working with DOA to make sure we implement it as such. So.
Thank you. I think the author would also like to comment.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. To my colleague, I did announce that during the public hearing for the folks that have the 1 meter and with all the condominiums or apartments they have. And as of today, we still haven't received anything because we've asked that on the announcement. They have to certify that they say they got 214 condominiums. There's 214 customers, not 150 and asking for the 200. And that's what we asked for. And I think we made a little bit of the adjustment, but we didn't fill it all because until they call or we asked for them to provide the information, they have not provided. And if it was there, I would have supported to provide everyone without any doubt.
That's totally off, because you're going to have all these other people who have condominiums, over 2,000 individuals on this island who utilize 1 meter. And what you're saying is you're only going to give a Lupan Cove because they put something in? I mean, this is an emergency session. Not everybody had the opportunity. We just had a public hearing on this bill. So how are we going to get a hold of them? They didn't know that we're going to sit here in an emergency, not everybody's glued to the table, to the Oh my gosh, we could have made an effort. This body should make an effort to contact every real estate agent on this island and let them know. Let's be proactive. It's about helping the people. So I don't think it's been done, and that's an issue. Number one, we're only giving to a few. Right now, I was just told only Lupang's going to get it. So that doesn't make sense. Okay, going to BBMR, who's not here. We received the CRER report, Mr. Byrne, but we didn't receive the special fund CRER report. Why is that?
The general fund CRE report was issued a little early so that it would be available for this committee. I believe the special fund report has just been issued.
And what are we in negative in some of those? What is the amount negative in the as special fund?
Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. I've been here.
Don't time me. I'll give it to you right now. Right now, we're already showing in a deficit. Close to $4 million in special fund that we are a negative in, just to FYI, $4 million. OPA, thank you so much for, pushing the administration to get out this audit report that's very much needed. And it's unfortunately, we just got it, today, and then we're supposed to go into this emergency session, and we haven't even got the single audit report out yet. I'm looking on my email, and I haven't received it yet. So it would be very helpful moving forward on anything we do from here on out. But the section on page 1, where it says general fund revenue budget versus actual, can you explain this paragraph or the paragraph after that where it talks about omit? Can you explain this particular paragraph?
I'm sorry, Senator, what are you referring to?
This is the fiscal highlight, the one that was sent out dated July 19th for your the audit.
Oh, my highlights for the audit that we released
Yes,
yesterday afternoon. Let me pull this up. You're referring to the last sentence in that first page?
Yes, the last paragraph. It's a long sentence, yeah, but it looks like a paragraph, yeah.
Thank you for asking that, Senator. In the audit report, I can't remember which page it is, the external auditor included a paragraph in their audit, in the statement, which read, Gov Guam management has omitted the schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in deficit, budget and actual, general fund, and notes thereto that accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America require to be presented to supplement the basic financial institutions. Statements. I apologize, I neglected to put quotes around that because that came straight out of the audit. I purposely quoted the audit report because when we were having initial discussions with the external auditors and the Department of Administration, and we saw the initial draft, I was shocked to see that the external auditor made mention of the fact that management this year decided not to include this schedule, which would have provided you with numbers on what the actual was and what the projected was, what the deficit was, and the changes in it. But for some reason, it wasn't included. I asked the question, I said, why is this? Department of Administration, I'm not sure Mr. Byrne was in on that meeting. It might have been just Grace. But I raised the question because I saw that and I pointed it out. And I was hoping that between the time that we had our last discussion, sometime in mid-June, that Department of Administration would have seen that the external auditor had put this in the audit and had put at the bottom, is generally accepted. It's usually generally accepted that it's included in all financial statements. I would have thought that they would have done it. When the final came out, it still wasn't there, and that statement was still there. So I put that that sentence into the audit, hoping somebody would see it. And I thank you for seeing it, but I don't know. That question's going to have to be asked to the Department of Administration. I apologize.
And
I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you so much. And before I ask the DOA why it was omitted, is this something that was omitted last year in the FY 2020 fiscal note?
No.
Audit report?
I don't believe it was. It would have been pointed out if it was.
So this year is the first time this has been in there. Mr. Byrne, can you explain?
Yes, Senator. May I just point out that the last sentence of that paragraph, may I read it? Says, our opinion on the basic financial statements is not affected by this missing statement. This is an audit. A lot of work goes into the audit, and it's a little concerning when senators are feeling, apparently, that the audit is not a true statement of the state of affairs. It is. It's an audit. It's been subject to third-party audit. So, you can look at the numbers, but you can't pull them apart. That particular statement was a very difficult statement to produce. The public auditor was already concerned about the timing of this audit, so a decision was taken to issue the audit because it didn't affect the basic financial statements or their opinion thereon without that statement.
Mr. Burns, this is something new. You're omitting a schedule, and we're just trying to figure out why this year, of all years, that you admitted the schedule of revenues, expenditures to show actuals and deficits. Just, I asked you that question, and you gave me another explanation.
I gave you an explanation.
Well, I just think that you just wanted not to put it in for whatever reason it is. I'm not sure, but I'd like to see this. As far as trying to get it on time, that's a responsibility of DOE to provide it, because there's a law that says audit reports have to be in by June 30th. And it's unfortunate, that I know this public auditor has been hounding on everybody since January to make sure they're on time. And it was late. That's why I wrote you a letter as well. Okay,
but we've already,
Yeah, can you still provide that information though, Mr. Byrne?
Yes, we can
Okay.
find it. It's not easy to do because of our aging financial system. And I was lucky enough to have a preview of an offer for a new financial system today. We can certainly look at it. But I need resources. As the public auditor mentioned, we've got over $1 billion of federal revenues, and as you and senators here have mentioned, we've had a nearly $100 million of local revenues that were more than expected.
Well,
I only have the same number of people at DOA.
Okay, well, I appreciate if you can give us the information that's been given to us every year since, to give us that information. Okay, appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Byrne, at the end of the day, you've paid all these other obligations. How much funding is left over from the excess revenue of FY 21? 21. How much is left over?
Well, I think I already answered that to Senator Perez, that this body looked at that expected excess revenues and determined that they should be used for purposes in fiscal 22. So, you know, the number at the end of fiscal 21 is the number at the end of fiscal 21. If this body chooses to look to that, to the surplus to fund new bills, which is what they did, it decided to appropriate all that money.
Did you use excess revenue to cover the war claims of 10 million?
Yes, that was what the bill instructed us to do.
And that money has already been spent?
Yes.
Okay.
Not all of it.
In Bill 170, which also appropriates $250,000 to GUMA, has that been awarded to GUMA yet?
Yes, it has.
Bill 172 for $3.5 million to Sanchez Elementary School in Humatec, has that been given to the Hagåtña Historical?
Yes, it has.
Okay. Has $500,000 been given to the veterans on Bill 227? These are already public laws.
Yes.
Has that already been deposited into their account?
Yes, it has.
Has any of the excess revenue for the fire had a $5 million over expenditure? Did you use any of the excess funding to cover the fire department's $5 million excess in spending? They spent more than what was appropriated, Mr. Byrne, we were told, and $5 million, it totaled up to $5 million. Was that used with excess FY21 money?
That was I believe that was in fiscal 21, and therefore would have been contemplated in the audit.
So you're saying, yes, you used fiscal, or you just...
No, if it was in fiscal 21, the reported numbers will already have included that $5 million.
If you overspend, if an agency has been given, let's say, an example, $1 million, but they end up there at the end of the fiscal year, they spent, $6 million, and they overspent $5 million, right? Okay, they overexpend $5 million from what was appropriated. So the question is, we were told there was an overexpenditure of $5 million. They were already appropriated given the funding that they were given in the budget bill. So how did that $5 million get paid?
Well, before I answer that, what I said was that if it was in fiscal 21, the reported numbers show that it was included. So the reported surplus was after that amount had already been taken account of. Very often departments overspend. Usually it's on personnel costs.
Thank you, Senator Titlegy. Your time is up. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the panel for being here. I sat here over the last couple of hours, and I didn't know whether I was listening to a public hearing or to a magic show, because, it's find the money under this bottle or this cap, and the authorization under, this tablecloth or that chair. Speaker Cruz, Public Auditor, thank you very much for the presentation, and it piqued my interest with regards to some of the concern that you have and the single audit that will be coming out. And the question that I have is very quite simply, you said that for fiscal year 21, there was what, 1.4 billion in federal costs, federal monies, and right now you found about 41 million in question costs. And how many programs was that, the 41 million under?
I believe it was The Deloitte audited 18 programs and 15 had question costs.
Okay.
Or not have question costs, but there were findings in 15 programs.
And the audit report will have delineated as far as what those 15 programs are.
Yes.
Question I have is in these question costs, if they're not resolved, is it very safe to say that then we're going to be responsible for repaying that $41 million?
I don't know. I do know that after I saw the single audit, I already spoke to my management, and we've decided that as soon as we issue the performance audit that we're currently working on, that for the remainder of the year, we will have to look at these programs that had issues.
Okay.
Because we have to look at it.
But to err on the side of caution, we may need to.
It may be, but as Mr. Byrne mentioned earlier, the $23 million that the auditors found was question cost in PUA. I don't know how much the feds are going to ask for back, because they've somehow, USDOL has given authorization to waive certain things and not collect on certain things. So I don't know how much of that. And that the amount that the auditors found of $23 million of question costs was only on the ones that they sampled.
Yeah. Okay. So does this include, obviously, and it's no big secret, there are some question costs already with FEMA. I remember in a roundtable, in a committee of the whole discussion we had in the previous bill, there was basically, Mr. Cruz, the head of the recovery office, said that there were some programs or some expenditures that FEMA was already had question on. Is any of this money, this $41 million, or these programs that you were looking at, also part of that?
I'm not sure if it's the emergency management performance grants. Then yes, when the highlights come out and when it'll list all 15 programs. I mean, if you want me, I can read it to you, but
no. Why don't we just dispense and save it, and I'll wait for the copy of it. I'll sit back here and won't read it on my iPad.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Beneventi, I think that one of the ways, and in discussions with the governor yesterday, the concern that she had was that that the GPA was primarily attributing the rising the fuel costs to the war in the Ukraine. Could there be another factor in as far as the rising fuel costs?
It could be, Senator, and of course, a lot of these prices started really rising right around the Ukraine issue, and of course, as everyone knows, the sanctions that are there on oil has made the cost of oil go down, as I mentioned, from 21 to 70-some%. That did not occur during the COVID period, although there has been speculation that because of COVID, the demand is going to come down, and therefore, that being the case, could drive some prices up, or vice versa. But again, most of this is and continues to be as a result of the worldwide events, most specifically Ukraine, which impacts world oil prices.
But we can't blame the Ukraine crisis on the number of times that oil tankers sat waiting outside of harbors to be able to unload their. And then there was a domino effect in as far as the production of that probably led in the rise in the cost because of all the other factors. Can that be attributed to that too as well?
Well, it could be, and I guess it's anyone's speculation what that could be at this point, Senator. All I'm saying is that it appears to be, my looking and reading and all of this, that that's the main reason for what has happened. But you are correct. Something else could spark it. The whole point is now is that oil costs are substantial, and we are paying above $100 a barrel for fuel, and as much as $160 a barrel for diesel.
Yeah, and you know, depending on which newscast that you watch or news source you watch, whether it be Fox News, CNN, or the Country Music Channel, everybody's got their own speculation, if you will, of what the rising of what the.
I look at oil price, Bloomberg, and all of that, because I think that's more the industry, no? And that look. So that's what I look at, and I read the articles, and of course, different articles could say different things, of course. But again, that has been, you know, the best that I could do to try and come up with some reason as to why it is happening. And I think one can assume that part of it, of course, is the war in Ukraine.
Okay. Well, and I appreciate it. And then, like you said, it's speculation, but, you know, I can provide a speculation too as well, but does it get the money to the people? So
I try, Senator, I really try to look at really not just listen to Fox because it's one end, not just listen to CNN because it's in the other end of the spectrum, and that's my, but I do look at the platogram, the oil price, the Bloomberg, and those are the commodity, oil commodity ones. No?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Byrne, and I'm going to refer to the fiscal note that was attached or that was provided to the committee when we were having this hearing on 325, and I appreciate. Do you have a copy of the fiscal note that was provided then? This is a fiscal note that was dated. Oh, I don't even remember. It's dated July 11.
Yes, Senator, I have it in front of me.
Okay. Are there any changes on this fiscal note that we should note between when it was submitted and now?
No, Senator. The Director of BBMR wrote to the Chairman and the Committee Appropriations that the fiscal note would stand.
Okay, so great. So it does stand, so it continues. And if I remember, because you were sitting right next to him when I was talking to him about this, and as far as the appropriations, and I appreciate the conversation we were having earlier with regards to the ability to be able to take care of appropriations or laws that were passed in previous appropriation measures. But if you remember correctly, first off, can you explain to me why we're here? Why are we here, Mr. Byrne? What is this bill for?
We're here because you're here debating this bill.
Which provides,
well,
basically provides permission for the administration to go ahead and use excess funds, right, to be able to make the rebate?
Thank you, Senator Blas. Your time is up. Ask in the next round.
I think the bill describes what the purpose of the bill is.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Senator San Augustine, we're now in the second round of questions. No questions from Senator San Augustine. Senator Rangel.
Madam Chair, I believe there was a request to bring in Congressman San Nicolas to come in, so we are going on the second round, and this would be an opportunity, you know, if we can get him in, and then on the second round, we can ask him the questions.
Thank you, Senator Titlegy. We did reach out to him and to his office, and we have not heard a response yet. So we will continue with the round of questions. Senator Perez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this question is for OFB. Are you able to track income tax refunds as far as what's being spent? Because I know we set aside money in the budget. Are you able to track the usage of that? What's remaining or what needs to be paid out?
No, Senator. My office does not have the capability of tracking that type of income coming into the government of Guam. We rely solely on the reports submitted by both Revenue Taxation Department Administration and, of course, the CRE report we get monthly.
Okay, thank you. So this question's for Director Byrne. If you can give us an update on the income tax refund status. In the latest report, there was 31.4 million refund returns processed awaiting payment. Has that changed?
I'm not aware of any change.
Okay. So considering that we have a 99 million excess or surplus, I don't know how to best explain that, but I guess, do you have a running total of what is remaining, considering that we have to pay out the tax refunds and the appropriation bill? So I know in the fiscal report or the fiscal note, it actually exceeded the 99 million, but that didn't include the tax refunds. And I know we did set aside money. It was from the budget. If you look at the budget, we did set aside money. So is there any, are we jeopardizing the refund process?
The tax refunds that are related to refunds due to taxpayers because of overpayments by their taxpayers are all contemplated by the budget bill.
So it would have no impact?
It would have no impact.
Okay.
No.
So the question is for Public Auditor regarding the question costs. So in the 2021, so basically the American Rescue Plan Act was passed in 2021 of March. Were there any question costs related to that particular act?
There were some issues with the Child Care Development Fund cluster, and I think that was in the American Rescue Plan. Of the 15 programs that are listed, unfortunately, they're just listed as the programs and not specifically delineated as to which ones were CARES and which ones were ARP. So I can get back to you on that, but right now the only one that jumps out to me is I know was in the ARP was Child Care Development.
Okay, thank you. So in the latest reporting regarding the use of ARP funds, 15 million was actually already encumbered by GPA. To your knowledge, Director Byrne, was this question at all? Was this one of the question costs?
No, it wasn't. It was actually expended in fiscal 21 and wasn't one of the question costs.
Okay, and can you just clarify, when were the interim rules used and when did the final rules take effect?
Sorry, Senator, could you repeat that question?
So this regards to the guidelines for using ARP funds.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just clarify when the interim rules were in effect and when did the final rules, when were they implemented?
Well, the ARP legislation, I think, was signed in March of 2021, March of 2020, right? And for almost a year, we were operating under the interim rules. They themselves didn't come out until, I believe it was June or July of that year. But they were in turn replaced by the final rules that were effective April the 1st of 2022.
So what changed in the final rules? Was it pretty significant in regards to the change?
There was a lot. I think the interim rules are about 80 pages. The final rules are well over 200 pages. In most cases, it was an emphasis on making sure that payments go to disadvantaged populations.
Okay. And so since 15 million was used under ARP, and that was during the interim rules?
Yes, it was during the interim rules.
Okay. And, I mean, considering we still are a disadvantaged population, have you been in talks with the Department of Treasury to question whether this is still allowable?
You may recall that we went to Washington to meet with the Treasury Department at the very beginning of this process, and they were very receptive with us, especially because of the, I guess, confusion or uncertainty or the things in the interim rules that we wanted to do that they hadn't considered. But at the end of that discussion, they made it very clear to us that once the final rules were issued, they weren't going to respond to, can we do this or can we do that? They were going to simply, if they felt it appropriate, and this, I should point out that this hasn't happened, that their Inspector General would, if they felt that a cost was inappropriate, their Inspector General would question it or investigate it in arrears. They weren't going to respond to any questions in advance.
Okay, maybe this is a side question for you, Director Byrne. I remember there was an RFP out for the financial management system. What is the status of that?
I'm very pleased to say that we had a presentation this morning from the leading bidder. It was a demonstration of how their system would work, and it was very encouraging. So we are going to follow up with that bidder with the intention of hopefully arriving at an agreement to contract with them.
For the General Manager, Beneventi, if you can just rehash, you were talking about the series of increases, LEAC increases from on April, July, September. So in April, what was the increase there? If you can rehash that.
Specifically, the numbers are not exact in my mind, but it's relatively, I think it went from about 18 cents to 20 cents in April. And then the new rates now, July 1st is to 25 cents, and September 1st is to 29 cents per kilowatt hour.
So this is all additive. So the 20 plus the 25 plus the 29 cents, is that?
It's an increase.
Oh, increase, okay.
Yeah.
And then you're...
Increase to 25, increase
okay.
to 29.
Gotcha. Okay, and then in regards to you were mentioning based on 1,000, is it wattage?
The average, based on the average consumption of an average residential customer, which is about 1,000 kilowatt hours, the impact on the rate is about $42 on their bill in July and August. It's $49 for each month, July, August, and then about another $45 in addition to that beginning September. So go up about, from the June bill, for 1,000 consumption, by September, the increase is about $84 on that bill.
So total?
Total, yeah.
But then if you add on the September, that would bring it up higher, right?
No, if you, my apologies, Senator. The increase on July 1st will be $42 on the average bill. And continue again, the same price, same amount will be there in October.
Okay. And
then September, you add another 45 to the 42. So their bill compared to June would have increased about $87 or so.
So we did get the recent CRER report, sorry, this is for Director Byrne, Are you seeing a shortfall in the special funds? Is there a shortfall? Are we experiencing that still?
Well, as I mentioned to Senator Taitagwe, although it was issued, I think I was here when it was issued, or maybe I was just arriving, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
Yeah, I think this is kind of critical information to kind of see where we're at as far as what we can appropriate. So, yeah, I do appreciate if you can maybe respond to that a little later. I think those are all my questions for now. Well, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I don't get the impression I'm any more clear than when we started this afternoon a couple of hours ago, whether or not the money genuinely is there to do the appropriation in the amount of $25 million that's being asked in this bill. I think that's where the concern ultimately is, because at one end we're hearing the administration's being cautious, and yet at the other end, the governor came before us several weeks ago in her State of the Island address proposing this whole idea that has us in special session today to appropriate, you know, in the amount of about $500 per resident on Guam that pays a power bill, that this funding is available and can be provided to each of our residents to offset the increased costs of power that all our people on Guam are currently experiencing. So I'm kind of confused here. I mean, which is it? And the clarification that's been provided by our public auditor right now with regards to previous appropriations. Again, you know, maybe we were receiving additional funds this year over what we originally had planned or anticipated, but we have existing obligations that have been authorized in previous legislatures that this funding can be spent on. So I'm a little confused. And then at the other end, you know, Senator Sabina had just asked, I mean, when the governor authorized the $15 million previously to go to GPA to offset the initial rate increase, you know, that would have affected or benefited every ratepayer on Guam regardless of what their income level was. We're assuming that offset, if I can ask our General Manager, John Beneventi, to clarify that $15 million was to offset the cost of all ratepayers for that period of time and what would have been perhaps an initial rate increase months ago when the administration provided the $15 million in federal funds to GPA.
I believe the way that funding was provided was to allow for the step increase of the needed rate. So I believe it started from 11, then went to 15, 17, and 19. So instead of going from 11 to 19, the difference in the step was what the governor provided, so that it would allow for, you know, to help, what do you call it, smooth the way or mitigate, you know, the way to all the ratepayers. Yes, because it was applied to the LEAC rate.
Mm-hmm. But that was something, General Manager Beneventi, that all residents had benefited from, regardless of whatever our income level was. It was a general benefit to all ratepayers.
Yes, it was on the LEAC itself, which benefit everyone, including not only residential, commercial, but also government entities and everyone.
So everyone benefited from that then, in general. Thank you for answering. I just wanted to ask the Director of Administration then, I mean, we're told that this rule with regards to how the federal funds can be spent, do we have the specific citation of what this rule is on what the ARP funding is limited to, that we cannot use it for additional power bills at this point?
I was referring, Senator, to the final rule. It was issued by the Department of Treasury to be effective April the 1st, 2022. And it, I'm sure it was published in the appropriate, it was published in the Federal Register. And it's entitled 31 CFR Part 35.
Well, can you read it to us? I don't have a copy of your binder that you have in front of you. Can you read it to us so we can know what the exact language is?
guess it depends how much time you have, because it's 437 pages.
Well, I'm assuming there's got to be some direct citation there that says it can't, if it's not related to the pandemic, it can't be spent on, because I have no idea what the bulk of this money has been spent on to begin with. I don't think the public has any idea the bulk of what this federal funding for the pandemic has been spent on either, so we don't know if it's all been spent on what it should be if this ruling just came down in April of this year, a few months ago. What is the specific citation?
As I said, it's 31 CFR.
Is there a specific sentences that put that restriction in place?
I can read you some sentences if you would find that helpful.
Well, do you have the sentence that would give you the impression that we're not allowed to use this funding for anything other than what? Pandemic-related expenses?
Issued on May 20, 2021, Treasury's interim final rule provided further detail on eligible uses of funds within 4 statutory categories: ineligible uses of funds and administration of the program. The interim final rule provided state and local and tribal governments substantial flexibility, which I think I mentioned before. And then it goes on, the final rule provides broader flexibility and greater simplicity in the program. The final rule provides for the following: public health and negative economic impacts, premium pay, revenue loss, water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And those are the 4 categories that it finds to be appropriate.
Nothing related to power?
Nothing related to power.
So how could you justify, how would the administration justify the previous $15 million provided to GPA then?
I think I already answered that it was under the interim rules that was issued.
And the interim rules allowed for that?
The interim rules were silent on that. They didn't have the 4 categories that are in the final rule.
So I guess if it was silent, you could spend it on anything you wanted then, if it didn't reference it.
I
Is that
suppose you
the
could,
interpretation?
but that would not be responsible.
Well, is that the interpretation? You're telling me it wasn't referenced, so if it's
wasn't
not
our
referenced, you could
interpretation.
determine how to use it on
It-
whatever you wanted to use it on?
It wasn't the interpretation of the administration.
Well, if it's not referenced, you said it was silent, so if it was silent, how could it be authorized then? Because if it's not specific, you could spend it on whatever you want?
The interim rule didn't have these 4 categories. The final rule, which we're trying to operate under now, as of today, had these 4 categories. Has these 4 categories.
Getting back earlier to the amounts that our public auditor has relayed, this $41 million that you mentioned, you don't ultimately know what may or may not have to be paid back, because that is concerning. $41 million is substantial. I mean, we've had circumstances in the past where an administration has misspent federal money, and then we end up having to have the people of Guam pay the misspending of that money back out of their own general fund coffers. What is the next option? Because that is a substantial amount, $41 million, that's been put in question by this audit. What is the response of the administration to that at this point?
Well, the administration has responded to each of the 30 findings with specific comments. I think the public auditor mentioned, and I would confirm, that half of the question costs, and question costs do not necessarily mean that there's a disallowance, it's just a question cost, is related to the pandemic unemployment program. And if I may respectfully correct the public auditor, the 23 million was actually taken, it wasn't taken from the sample, it was taken from the listing of receivables of overpayments that was provided by DOL. But as he went on to mention, there is a program in place for those payments either to be repaid, and some people are repaying them, but more frequently for them to be forgiven, and that would continuously reduce the 23 million.
But we don't know yet at this point whether or not the federal government is going to forgive those amounts. And even
Well,
if they would give a portion of it, you're giving me the impression there may still be amounts that they're not going to forgive, that we're going to be left with holding the bag.
You shouldn't get that impression from what I've said. There has been continuous forgiveness of these amounts. Remember that these are taken from the balances at June 30th, of September 30th, 2021. This is the audit date. There has been since then continuous forgiveness, and there continues to be continuous forgiveness of those amounts in accordance with the US DOL program.
So how much has been forgiven then?
I don't have that number. I recall the other day the director of DOL mentioned a number for 5 million, but that was just one period. I couldn't tell you cumulatively how much there was.
Well, is there any way we could get that information before we proceed on this bill? I think it would be helpful to know what has been forgiven of the 41 million.
Well, I don't think it's really relevant to this bill. It's a US DOL program, and it's not unique to Guam. Every state is having to deal with this issue. So I personally would commend it to you that in some way or other, these question costs will be resolved.
So you're telling us that this $41 million ultimately is going to be resolved?
We haven't, in this administration, no funds have been returned to the federal authorities as a result of any previous question costs.
And what happens if they don't forgive that amount, Mr. Burns? Then where does that put us?
Well, either they have to collect it from the recipients, or we, in extreme circumstances, may or may not have to return it.
We may or may not.
May or may not.
But we don't know as of this
We
moment.
don't know, but I'm telling you that I think you can look at the program yourself, you can look at the program in other states, and I think it's extremely unlikely that the majority of that, if any, will be returned to the federal government.
But we don't know.
We don't know. We don't know. It's an estimate, just like anything else.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I see I'm almost out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Atta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be yielding my time to Senator Duenas.
Thank you. Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. We talked about the rules, and the final rules, and I read through some of the final rules myself from the Treasury Department, and it doesn't specifically, it's vague, right? And I think the administration also argued for money to be used that's not necessarily in those categories that you explained. How, again, were we able to utilize this fund for the hospital? Is that in the final report?
Yes, thank you for that question, Senator. When we went to Treasury, we pointed out that under the existing rules, there was no provision for construction of a hospital. And we were told by US Treasury at that time that a number of states and tribal governments had asked why that was omitted. And when the final rule came out, that was a permitted use.
Thank you, sir. And possibly the same thing could be with the power situation, that we can use this, and this is a pandemic situation, and the same argument can probably be made for the utilities, like CNMI has done, using ARPA funds for the utility program. So I'm not really convinced that Guam can't. If we argue for one thing, why can't we argue for something else as well? And I believe this crisis is associated with the pandemic, and I've even read some pages in the final report that talk about being taxed as an income if federal funds are used for utility benefit. So the federal government recognizes that the rising utility costs have been associated in some way with the pandemic. So I just feel, I understand your arguments, I understand your presentations, and you can hear from our colleagues here too. We're just going back and forth, or some can say in circles, but But I think we can make the argument, if we work it together, that this should be through ARPA funds. And that's where I'm going with this. So, but I thank you for your presentation, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Senator Dueñas.
Madam Chair. Have we gotten that reconciliation for appropriations associated with fiscal year 21 yet?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Senator?
Have we gotten the reconciliation yet of the audited financials of fiscal 2021 versus the bills that we passed using the excess revenues of 21 and that reconciliation? Just to refresh your memory, the audit states that the $70+ million in additional revenues, but after the adopted levels versus the actual revenues received, the adjusted was $30.5 million. That was the snapshot in time for fiscal year 2021, but we went back and appropriated to the level of the full 70 some odd million from 2021. So it seems to me, Steve, that if we appropriated to the level of the excess revenues as per collections, but the audit says the actual excess is 30.5 million, then we may be in deficit if we appropriated all of that 70+ million from fiscal year 2021. That's why I'm saying, do we have that table to show the public laws that we passed representing the excess revenue of 2021?
I don't have that table at the moment, Senator. Again, we just got the audit yesterday, and I'm going to take the liberty right now to say that until such time my office has the opportunity to review that and utilize the information that's provided in the audit and compare it to whatever outstanding public laws are out there, that basically we're using revenues identified as the excess or surplus, whatever you want to call it. I can't comment on that at this point, but if what you're saying, if what I'm hearing what you're saying, that we did basically, the legislature did appropriate the entire amount of the excess in FY20, then there might be a possibility that what you're saying is correct. But then again, I need to go back and at least compare those numbers.
So, Madam Chair, once again, for the record, I believe we're going to need that table before proceeding forward. But I have another question at this point, a series of questions. Mr. Byrne, are we in a public health emergency?
I believe the governor has continued the public health emergency through, I guess it's the end of July.
Do you think it would stand to reason that power to a household that provides for sanitation, refrigeration of food commodities, other types of situation with people who may be living in a household that requires climate control would be related to a public health emergency?
I imagine that's the reason for the bill.
So under the public health emergency, we're using federal funds, ARP funds.
No, Senator, it's not any public, power is not a public health. The federal definition doesn't permit it. Our local definition, we can define it any way we want. But as the public auditor said, I hope you don't want me or anybody else in the administration to take an unwarranted risk in the expenditure of federal funds. They certainly will be question costs.
My point, Mr. Byrne, is that that is not a stretch if that's what we're expending it for under a public health emergency.
Well, perhaps we just have to differ. I don't think that's an appropriate risk to take. Why take that risk when the funds are available locally?
Well, I think we'll continue to debate that, but let me move over to Mr. Beneventi. Mr. Benavente, you stated that when the 15 million was transferred, you used it to offset proposed increases due to the LEAC. Is that correct?
It was to offset and allow for a step increase. In other words, it could have gone where the rate was increased from whatever 11 to 19, but of course that's a huge burden to the ratepayers, no? So there was a discussion to allow, if we did a step increase to get eventually where we needed to do, to be, that will be allowed, or that will be provided some offsetting funding, and that was how it was. It occurred at that time, no?
So I think I've also heard you state, Mr. Benavente, that earlier on another line of questioning that you did not disconnect during the entire, or for a time certain during the pandemic and emergency declaration, correct?
That's correct. I believe it's at least 18 months that we did not disconnect anyone. And so therefore, we were very glad that the majority of our customers did pay their bill on time, even despite the no disconnection notices. And that was publicized throughout the whole island, no? So there were some that, of course, for whatever reason, did build up a bill, which when we came out of that decision and began the disconnection again, we asked everyone to come in and make payment arrangements. And if those that didn't, we just set a payment arrangement, I believe, of about a year to allow them to pay that back. And of course, everything was going fine until later in the beginning of this year when fuel prices just skyrocketed. And I have charts that show it's really just almost 90 degrees just since in the past 6 months, no? Just off 90 degree. That's how fast it was.
Right, I understand, Mr. Benavente, and I think that, you know, you've been extremely sensitive to the situation. What I'm leading to is you probably currently have a number of accounts that are currently active because of the payment agreements that were made by customers who would have otherwise been disconnected.
That's correct.
So this credit, and I don't think this is a stretch, this credit, I believe, could be definitely considered pandemic related because it would be offsetting bills that they currently have arrears on in accounts that are under payment agreement, that now it's going to be much easier for them to manage by having an additional $100 credit that will not be on their power bill.
I think the credit, as I see it, is really to offset the increase, not the one from the previous. You know what I mean? In June, they're already paying their arrears plus whatever their bill for the month is. However, in July, the rate increase from 20 to 25 cents accounts for like $42. See? And then the same 42 for August, and then September, it goes up $84 compared to June. So I think that's what I believe this is trying to do. So
no, I understand
what
we're trying to do here, but what I'm trying to say, Mr. Benavente, is there is a number of accounts, I think it's easy to assume, that are still under pandemic-related stress in terms of what they have accumulated in terms of their obligations.
Yeah, and I venture to say that's probably in the neighborhood of about 3,000 to 4,000. No?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mr. Byrne, I want to direct you to what you're quoting, the 31 CFR, as I'm reading through the copy at this time. And under section 11, this would be on 4 of 10 on the page here, it says, a program, service, capital expenditure, or other assistance that is provided to a disproportionately impacted household, population, or community, including services to address health disparities of the disproportionately impacted household population or community, housing vouchers and relocation assistance. But on the top there, I asked you a question earlier. Maybe I'll ask this to Mr. Beneventi as well. Is power critical to sanitation in a household?
Well, if I could answer first with respect to the first part of your question. As I mentioned before, under separate funding, federal funding, we're making payments of power and water, which is obviously critical to sanitation, to renters and homeowners who qualify because of income. And that's a separate rule, but as this rule says, it's directed at disadvantaged populations. This particular bill is not so directed. There's no means test. It's just directed at every account. But I'll let Mr. Beneventi pick it up from there.
If you rule out the issue about having hot water or so, water is critical, no? Because that's what you use for your flushing of the toilets, if you will, brushing your teeth, and all of that. But, and if the requirement is you must have hot water, which is not really necessary for most people or not necessary, but it's not typically used by most people in subsistence or whatever, no? Then really power is critical to drive the water wells and everything to provide energy to the homes, to provide water to the homes. But as much as I like to say it is critical to everybody, in the case when it's sanitation, that's the only way I could interpret it at this time. So.
We have a lifeline rate, right?
Correct.
I would imagine the thought process behind a lifeline rate was the critical nature under which at least a basic amount of power is designed to sustain a household for sanitation and livable purposes.
For lights and things like that. No?
Safety, sanitation, the like.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't know how much, it could be, Senator, I just don't, I don't know the basis of all of that. On the original lifeline rate. No?
So I want to return to the public auditor at this point and basically state and get this on the record. When the audit was performed for the fiscal year 2021, and that audit was began, conducted, and concluded, did it take into consideration any other bills introduced that would become public law during the time of the unaudited balance existing in fiscal year 2022 that this body may have passed? Would it have taken into consideration any of those potential expenditures?
The audit that was released yesterday is a picture of what existed on September the 31st, 2021, last year. It does not take into account what happened in October of 21, November or December of 21, or any of the months in 22. It may have taken all that time to get that picture developed, but it was only a picture of the situation that existed in September 31st, and maybe some reconciliations of bills that had been encumbered prior to September 31st and were paid in November and December. But it does not take into account what happened in 22.
And I lead you to this, Mr. Speaker, because I know that you're quite busy with the obligations and the day-to-day duties that you have, but you also did hold the position before as the finance chair. One of the frustrations, and I think the public auditor could understand this, that this body has had is every time we ask the administration for expenditure reports, and they said, we paid the deficit. We never get a registry of any reconciliation of what was paid. As you have said, was it a pet project from, the 20th Guam Legislature that identified a baseball field down in Talafofu? We don't know, because that's not given to us. It's, we paid the deficit. We don't have a deficit. So we don't have an accurate recordation of that. So my question is, and I think this is critical that I get this answer from you, would it be prudent, because as the numbers bear out right now, this is why I'm going to quarrel with what the Department of Administration Director is saying in terms of what's available. The audited financials were, in 2021, $79.2 million above adopted revenues. But the final number is $30.5 million. Obviously, there was deficit elimination. Bills that we don't know what was paid, they were paid. So if we appropriated close to $79 million of that excess revenue after everything's closed and the audit goes forward, and we only have $30.5 million of audited revenue, there is a suspicion that there could be a $40 million deficit. If we spend, that's why I think it's important that we have that table before we go forward.
I think if financial management does the controls, they can stay within the budgeted amount and any excess that might be received as a result of the revenue projection being as low as it was.
Right.
But so if you have good financial management, you won't get a deficit, because you won't have the credit card. You're only dealing with cash.
Correct. And thank you, Mr. Auditor, because when you were here, and what bears out in your audit states that it was because of the controlled spending by this legislature and the retirement of debt prior and the conservative revenues that we adopted is what carried forward to allow for this cash management to be available. Now we're putting the car in reverse, in my opinion, if we continue down this road, because yes, now we appropriated to that level of the 79 million, and now we already appropriated another 25 million of the current fiscal year for the LEAP program, and then we are now trying to appropriate another 25 million. And while I have heard from my colleagues with great respect that I hold, that there is the capability of cash management, it is all these accumulated appropriations that also end up. We've been chided before on this issue of having spent money but not having the appropriation authority, but we had the cash. And when we did that, we had a deficit, and the question was, what kind of a deficit do we have? The answer was, you have an appropriation deficit, because you had a cash in the bank, but you spent more than what you had on paper.
If we're just discussing this bill,
right,
then I would have to say I'm embarrassed that in the years that I was here that I didn't do supplementals like this, because this is a good idea. Increase the revenue projection and appropriate from that, but it still stays within the revenue projection. And as I was telling Mr. Guerrero from OFB, that this change in the revenue projection will also reduce the CRER 99. Because if your projection was 700 million and you raised 799, yes, you would have $99 million difference. But if you increase the revenue projection and the projected revenue, and you in the supplemental and say it's 732, then that means that the excess would only be 66. And so if we always do a supplemental appropriation where it cleans it up and says this amount is here, this is what we're spending it for, you won't have the excess. And if financial management stays within do with their cash, then you won't get to a deficit issue.
And as our good uncle said, now we're cooking with gas, because you're right. But before you can go in and anticipate, like you said, this bill anticipates fiscal year 22, you must reconcile fiscal year 2021 of all of those bills that you've passed, because you've got to, because you have no control over what the governor does. The governor can say, absolutely, all those bills passed, all that money's encumbered, all that money's expended. But if you appropriate it to 79 and the audited revenue available is only 30.5, you got a 40 million plus deficit. So you got to carry that forward and take that in consideration, because as you said, the CRER will adjust if this bill passes, because you will no longer have that excess. That excess will be accounted for as having changed the appropriation, because you're using in 2022, you're using the adopted revenues to say that you have the close to $100 million now. That's why this is a lot more complex than just saying the money's there, because the snapshot says the money's there. And I think we'll have amendments on Monday for that. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Dueñas. Senator Torres. No questions. Senator Tydegui.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try and make this very short, but appreciate again everyone being here. And I don't have any doubt that we are here trying to assist our community to get back on their feet, and especially those who are in most need, because regardless, if the gas rates were based on Ukraine or not, if you lost your job due to COVID, or even trying to catch up right now, going back to work now and trying to catch up on all the bills that you've accumulated, regardless if there was a war in Ukraine, we all had issues and suffered during COVID. I did want to ask Mr. Byrne, the deficit, the special funds that were short in FY21, based on the CRE report, it was stated during one of the Committee of the Wholes that that short was about $20 million. Is that how much you had paid to the special funds, or covered those shortfalls that they had in FY21? What was the total?
Thank you. No, it wasn't, because there were some reduced expenditures in those funds, so it ended up at about 12 million.
So it was about 12 million, not 20. And then you've cleared out the 1.3 million that was a deficit. Was it 1.3 or 1.5 million?
The 1.5 accumulated carried forward deficit was eliminated.
Okay, so it wasn't 1.5. Okay. And the 20 was actually only 12 million, correct? For the special funds.
The amount of money that the general fund had to make to the special funds in general was about 12 million.
12 million, okay, thank you for that. Mr. Byrne, the art funding that was given to Guam, close to $600 million, and now sitting in a bank somewhere at 300 million, that's still sitting there. Is there a deadline date to have these funds expended?
Yes, Senator. December 31st, 2024 is the date that it has to be encumbered, and December 31st, 2026 is the date that it has to be spent.
So encumbered by December 2024, correct? Correct. Okay. Is it true that some of the funds are hard to expend because of the procurement process and what you're going through, that we're having some difficulty? Because of procurement and even finding the material or equipment, things like that? Or
procurement of certain capital items or even supplies is difficult now because of worldwide supply problems. And that's not And unfortunately, we're at the end of a very long supply chain, but that affects the world generally.
Okay. And the Guam Regional Transit, there was 156,770 that was appropriated to them. Has that been given to the Guam Regional Transit Authority?
How much again, please?
It was 156,707.
If they asked for it, it was given to them. Right?
Okay. They asked for it. Mr. Byrne, I know that the speaker is not here, and I'm hoping she's feeling better, and we wish her a speedy recovery. It's always notorious that when she talks to you, and she brings up the fact that I think it was in FY 2020 where in the budget bill, we incorporated that any excess revenue, 10 million, would be going to the hospitals, the Guam Memorial Hospital. I'm sure you're very familiar. Every time you come here, she's going to ask that question. So can you give me the status? I mean, with all these expenditures that you've been paying off, have you provided that money to Guam Memorial Hospital for $10 million yet?
No, we haven't. And had we done so, we would have broken Senator Duenas' rule and spent money we didn't have.
And do you have, well, you're doing it right now, if you ask me. You can look at some of the other stuff that are, would you consider that a prior year obligation, the 10 million? Since it's in a budget bill and it's by law, and we're talking about all these bills in the past, right, that was appropriated and gives the governor the authority to use funds to pay for it, doesn't need any authorization from this legislature because it's already been passed. And that particular amount was in a budget bill to require for that. So would you consider that a liability? Or an obligation? Sorry. Well,
yes, it could be. It's a continuing obligation.
It's a continuing 10 million,
Yes.
so we can add that to the top. So, like I said, I'm not going to try to belabor this. Again, I'd like to thank Mr. Benventi for being here. I'm sure we want to, assist your customers. And Mr. Byrne, I'm hoping that you will provide the information that we requested for the explanation on the omit scheduled. If we can get that information, as well as, the liability and obligations, prior year obligations, if you can get that to us.
The prior year obligation, the continuing appropriations are in the audit.
Of all bills from today in the past.
That's something Mr. Guerrero committed to do.
Oh, committed to do. Okay. I think he's going to probably need your help too, for his health. So that being said, Mr. Guerrero, and definitely Public Auditor, I want to thank you so much, and I'm hoping that Bill 302, I think that's the number to assist you, so that next year we're not in a situation like that, sitting here, trying to get information, so that we are being fiscally responsible. I mean, we owe it to the people of Guam. They're the ones that pay our checks. We don't print money, it comes from the public. And they want to make sure that every dime that we spend is done, done in a way that we're very responsible, and that we're not just going to, like Public Auditor said, give them a credit card and go and spend like crazy, even though you're given an allowance. There's an operation cost. Oh, my time is up.
Yes, thank you, Senator Chidegui.
So I thank you again, Public Auditor. Thank you.
Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, just to continue on with my, the question that I had, prior to the expiration of my time in the last round. Mr. Byrne, I guess the question is the bill that's before us right now is basically to appropriate some of the excess fund into the budget, quite honestly, okay? Right, so that we can authorize to spend this money to provide the the rate rebate to consumers. Is that correct?
It's a supplemental appropriation,
Right.
as the Public Auditor said.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate the Public Auditor, and I was with him in many of those budget discussions, and thank you for the concern that you brought up with regards to how it should have been done before and how it should be done now, which is what we're doing here. That said, going back to the fiscal note that was provided for this bill, I'm going to refer to Public Law 3665, the $25 million appropriation to DOA for LEAP. And if you recall in the public hearing, because you were sitting right next to Mr. Carlson, in that there was an amendment by Mr. Carlson that was probably not, that was inappropriate to be able to use that, because the language in the law says you take it from the general fund. It didn't increase the general fund. You're supposed to take it from there. Yet, here it shows that you guys took excess funds. Can you explain that?
Senator, I didn't write the bill. I think we've had several attempts at trying to determine whether appropriations come from excess or surplus, as some wish to call it, or the general fund, which is the general fund balance. I think we've seen several bills and several laws, all with different variations on this.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Byrne, because I'm looking at this listing here and I'm looking at the public laws, and I took the time to be able to query the public laws that is mentioned here, and guess what? Each of the public laws where it has the appropriations other than the LEAP appropriation does increase the general fund amount.
Yeah, I think the appropriate, I entirely agree with the public auditor on this. I think the appropriate approach where revenues are expected to exceed the budget is to appropriate those revenues.
Right.
If you don't see the revenues, you can't appropriate them.
Sure. But if it's not specific to be able to use that, then you're supposed to just work within the budget that you've had, right?
Yes, I mean, there is a possibility that you might generate funds by not spending something, and that's probably when you appropriate it from the general fund. But that's not the case in this particular bill.
It may not be the case in this particular bill, but the question is here, we're trying to find ways, to be able to make sure that this is funded properly, but then in looking at those ways, thank you for the information, from BBMR and from the administration, but I'm almost tempted to say there should be more in the excess, and in the more in the excess, we should provide it more to the people. And then have you guys explain where in the budget you got the $25 million.
Which 25 million?
For the LEAP.
For the LEAP?
Yeah. Public Law 3665.
We didn't get it. It was the bill passed by the legislature.
The bill passed by the legislature says you get it from the general fund, which
from
was
the general fund, right?
Right.
And we had, whether you like it or not, there was a reported surplus of over 25 million in the fiscal 21 audit.
Thank you, Mr. Burns, but no, that wasn't the case. If you look at the other bills that were passed into law, it was very specific as to how you were going to be able to do that.
I don't agree, but okay.
But then I suggest you go back to the public hearing and listen to what your colleague said, who was sitting right next to you on that. Madam Chair, I think that, in interest of time here, there was a request that our delegate come before this body to be able to provide some answers or his take on the funding source, and to be able to, further negotiations and further discussion as to, what amendments, if you will. Since I'm the last in the list right here, that can we take a recess prior to going into the third round?
This completes the
Third round.
Yes, I believe Senator San Agustin will make our majority leader.
But I think it's incumbent, because one of the things is that it's necessary that, again, I have to agree with Senator Brown in being able to provide, in getting, different takes and different opinions on how this best can be resolved. I don't think it's anybody's intent here not to provide, the assistance. It's just which is the best route to be able to do this. Okay, so I'm going to ask for that. Well, can we just take a recess so that we figure out what we want to do before the third round?
We'll take a moment's recess.
Thank you.
The Committee of the Whole is back from recess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to move to that we recess till Monday at 10, and at that time reach out to the Congressman's office and ask if the our delegate to Washington, Congressman Mike St. Nicholas, can come before the body to be able to provide basically his opinion and what his take on what funding can be utilized for this initiative. And in good faith, give him enough time to be able to respond and see if we can be able to do this.
There's been a motion to recess until 10 a.m. Monday morning and to allow for us to continue to try to contact the congressman and bring him in as part of the Committee of the Whole. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we are in recess. Yes.
Madam Chair, I just recommend that, I'd like to thank the panel that's here, that they'll be released because
Yes.
the 2 rounds are complete.
Okay, thank
They'll
you
be
very
released?
much. Yes, we'll release this panel and we'll come back to recess.
Madam Chair, I respectfully request that we reserve the right to call in Mr. Byrne, because I believe that if it's a matter of who has authority to speak on behalf of the federal rules and the rules that govern the federal funds, that I believe that it is this administration through Mr. Byrne and the governor's office that have that ultimate authority and responsibility. So if there is a difference of opinion or a rebuttal, that's necessary, because we can otherwise have any opinion, but if it's not an opinion of authority or responsibility, then there, there's no point to it. So I would request that the responsible people, being this administration and Mr. Burns' office, be available to discuss or rebut or clarify any points raised.
Okay, I believe the author of the bill has also said that he would like to keep the whole panel, so we'll keep the panel. Mr. Byrne, and call the congressman. We'll continue to contact him. Okay. Thank you very much.
Point of order, isn't the, I'm supposed to move the recess, make the motion to recess?
The motion to recess is combined.
Yeah, but point of order, who's designated to do that? Isn't the assistant majority
Senator
leader?
Blas has made the motion to recess.
Yeah, but just as a point of order, who's designated to do that? Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. We are in recess till 10 a.m. Monday morning.